Welcome to Small Business, Big Network, the podcast for small business owners who want big results from their networking. I'm Liz Drury, a freelance voiceover artist who knows that if you're not working, then networking could help. Matt Holmes is a world record holder and the founder and CEO of Handshaking. His company doesn't have any clients and doesn't sell any services. And it's all founded on networking. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Matt, you are a world record holder. So before we get into talking about your business, I would love to know about your world record and how it came about.
Sure. So several years ago, I was getting out of my first business in the real estate industry. And that was a business I kind of, didn't share with the world, which is one of the reasons I wanted to get out of it. I wanted to go into something I was really passionate about. And I was passionate about networking. And I learned that because my friends started calling me Handshaking Holmes. So when they did that, I loved it because the handshake means so much to me. That's the start of a relationship. And how you manage that relationship is what's really behind networking. It's not about giving your business card away at meetings. It's about how you handle your relationships, long term.
Yeah.
So once I knew I was going to launch a business all about handshakes, that really narrowed down the bucket on what type of world record I could break. And I looked at various handshake world records and figured out that the best one to attempt to break would be the longest handshake between two people. And I attempted and broke that world record several years ago now.
And how long was that handshake?
Sure. So we applied to break the world record with Guinness, although there's tons of different world record websites and news sources out there, and they allow you a 5-minute break for every hour. But you're not allowed to sleep. You have to stay awake. So I was awake a total of 50 hours. The timer stopped at, yeah. I'm glad I did that before my 30s, but the timer stopped at 46 hours. And after you deduct our breaks, that put us at 43.5 hours, which was exactly 1 hour past the previous record.
Wow. And has anyone else attempted that since your record?
No, people seem to. I tell them it's an easy record since you can take the break. If you shake hands for 3 hours, you are allowed to stop shaking hands and take a 15-minute break to do whatever you may need to do throughout a whole entire weekend.
That's amazing. So, not
Thanks.
surprisingly, the name of your company is Handshaking. Tell me how your company came about.
Sure. So, in the early days, I didn't really quite know what the business model was, to be honest with you. I just knew I wanted out of real estate. I loved developing assets and passive income from rent. I loved that business model from real estate, but I didn't want physical real estate. I wanted to be online. I wanted to outsource to different countries, and I wanted to help people online. And I didn't really know what that was. I just knew that it needed to be involved with networking.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of started doing personal websites, or really any marketing agency, random services in the early days. And that didn't really have a meaningful impact. We didn't make much money during the first few years. But when things changed for us is when we started, instead of worrying about how much a client could afford to invest with their website, we just started building our own websites. And we started building lead generation websites. So we would pick a city, we would pick a niche, and we would invest and develop a website that would get phone calls for this niche in this specific city. And then we ended up selling the phone calls instead of services. So instead of selling marketing services, we shifted to selling the results that everyone's looking for from marketing services, which is live phone calls of customers looking for a quote right now. And we've been on that business model for the past 4 years almost.
Right. So you actually have no clients and you don't sell any services. Is that right?
Correct.
And so tell me how it works in practice.
Sure. So I'll give you an example of the first website. So the first one was called Fort Collins Concrete Contractors. So, Fort Collins is a city. Mm-hmm. Concrete contractors is the niche. And we developed that website. We got it to rank on Google in the city of Fort Collins for people looking for driveway repairs, sidewalk additions, patio additions. And sure enough, after a few months, it started getting some phone calls. And we were able to find a concrete contractor and forward those phone calls directly to their phone. So as soon as a customer calls, they get a quote, and then the contractor would prepay us in advance for a batch of leads. And that's how that business model works.
Right. Okay. So concrete contractors was your first foray into this. What other kinds of businesses have you got leads for?
Sure. So now today, it's more about sending the phone calls to help the contractors shake more hands with customers, and we've gotten into lots of different. We're always experimenting, and to be honest, some cities might be better for some niches. So it's always just a experiment. We launch about 4 websites per month. We used to be doing 10, but we've tried carpet cleaning, window tinting, roofing, dent repair. What else? Lots of different models, but we're trying to. We like to experiment with new niches to see what's easy for us to win at. But what I've realized is even if we win, we need to eventually just pick a few niches that are similar businesses because it's really different. A roofing company, for example, they might work with an insurance company. It's not the homeowner paying, where a concrete company, it's usually a smaller business and the homeowner's paying. So you really have to think twice before you go out there and try a ton of different niches. But
Yeah.
it's also good to test, so it's kind of a balance, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, how do you decide which niches to try?
Well, now we kind of have our set 4 niches that we launch, and then we'll try one experiment. Like right now, we're kind of experimenting with some electrical or smart home automation websites,
Hmm.
and it takes if you're ever going to launch your own website to make passive income, give it a fair 6 to 24 months to before you decide if it's been a successful website or not. Because sometimes it just takes time. That's
Yeah.
what Google's looking for. They're
Yes.
not looking for the brand new website. They want the person who's been around for a long time.
That's right. Because I guess Google kind of trusts websites that have been there for a bit longer.
Yep, especially if it's about one thing in specific and not a ton of different weird things that changes over time.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's right.
So let's talk a bit about networking now, then, which is obviously your passion. Why do you feel that networking is so important for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so for me, networking was really important in the early days because I set out with just a little bit of money left over from exiting my real estate company and didn't really know what was next. And networking is what helped me really figure out, okay, what's my business model? Which direction am I going with this? It helped me with mentorship. If you don't network, you're going to have quality mentors. So that's one reason I think networking is important. And yeah, in the early days, one takeaway I took from I actually had this was called the Handshaking video series in the early days. So we weren't doing lead generation websites. We were doing this, random online services and hosting a video series to kind of have the theme
Hmm.
of what type of services we're offering and why we're offering them. So yeah, one thing I learned from most of the guests I interviewed is the importance of really paying it forward and investing long term. No one likes the used car salesman that meets you, calls you back 20 times for 2 weeks, and then you never hear from them again after you buy a car.
Yeah.
It's about looking long term, 10 plus years out, and providing value right away. Right, that used car salesman's not helping you right away; they're just asking for the sale, and no one likes that either.
No.
So
Yeah.
anyway, we could dive into that in whichever direction you'd like as well, if you'd like.
Yeah. I mean, what kind of networking groups did you go to initially? Were they national groups? Was it groups that were just more local to you? How did you get started?
Yeah, so I was in Denver for both the real estate company and then stayed there for this online company Handshaking, and I ended up starting a group. Of course, I went to tons of different events. I'm an extrovert. It gives me energy to talk to other people, so I respect that not everyone's an extrovert that gets energy from others, but that doesn't mean that you can still use some of the networking tactics that benefit you later. So I went to different founder events, and then I eventually started a meetup group called Startup Denver, and that meetup group grew to 4,000 members. We would do monthly pitch events, and obviously hosting events. An even better way to get connected with everyone. We would pick different founders that would come and pitch their idea, and then hey, we also needed to go and talk to the big dogs that would be judges, kind of like the sharks in Shark Tank, and I just met a ton of really valuable mentors and investors through that process. Ran that meetup group for a few years, and Obviously, we didn't charge for the events in the early days. We provided value. We weren't asking for anything in advance, and that's looking back. That's kind of what's built a lot of what's turned into my quality mentors today, as well as good friends today in Denver.
Yeah. So how much time do you think that a startup business owner should dedicate to networking?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on your stage. If you're newer or if you have not started your business yet, I think you should really be investing a lot of time in it, and you should be investing that time before you think you need to invest that time.
Mm.
And the way that you should be investing that time is not just to other business owners. You can help anyone. One of the guests I interviewed, John Paul DeJoria, the founder of Patron Tequila, Paul Mitchell Hair Products. He was the first person on my show that said, Matt, it's about helping that person. When you're driving down the highway and you see that car broken down, it's about making that split second decision to pull over now.
Yeah.
Don't pass that car and say that you're going to help them next time. It's about providing value so fast that you don't even hesitate in a situation like that. And to hear that coming from a self-made billionaire who came from nothing was just fascinating to me.
Yeah, that's really interesting advice. And, it's so important, I think, for people to realize when networking that it's all about giving value to other people. It's not necessarily about looking for something for yourself, at least not in the first instance.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. As your business matures, you have a more proven business model. You kind of know who you're talking to and what you're talking to them about, and you kind of have your set process and your set. Maybe you have services, maybe you have products like us, but either way, it's the networking is in kind of going a little bit outside of that scope, giving a little bit extra than what your business says that it does. Whether those are paying clients or just people you're meeting in a networking event, or oftentimes it kind of turns into its own form of mentorship or advice within your industry and niche.
Yeah,
And that's the way to handle your networking once you kind of mature.
yeah. So what common mistakes do you see people making when networking, especially when they're starting out doing networking?
I would say the biggest mistake is no follow up. You meet so many cool people at a networking event. Maybe you meet 10 and one person emails you, and that's it. It's all in the follow up, and you might have an exciting conversation, and go ahead and take the time to connect with that person on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever's popular in your town, and stay in contact for a few years. You don't need to email them and take it somewhere right away. I mean, sometimes you want to schedule a phone call, within the next couple of weeks, but it's okay if not. Still take the time to connect with them and make a reminder. I have a friend who has what he calls a friend RM. It's like a CRM, customer retention. What was it? Customer relationship
Yeah.
manager, but it's a friend RM. So I don't know if you need to go that far, because it only requires going a little bit further than the average person to really set yourself apart as a person of value, thankfully. But yeah, follow up. It's all in the follow up to answer your
Yeah,
question.
I think you're right. It's not often, is it, that you meet somebody in a networking meeting where either they need your services there and then, or you need their services, but you might down the line, and if you haven't kind of followed up and kept in contact with them, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And it takes time to build trust.
Mm,
Services don't always guarantee a result.
yeah,
So it takes time to build that trust.
yeah. So let's have a little chat about COVID then and how that has affected your networking. What happened to you?
Well, I was just starting an exciting, not career, but an exciting hobby, paid speaking right before. And if you can get on a stage and share your message, that's a great way to network. So I was enjoying that, and I personally enjoy the thrill of getting up there and looking at the whole audience and saying, I am so nervous. I thought I was going to vomit before I got up here. It's just something to break the ice, and now there's just none of that, and it's awful. And so I really think COVID ruined a lot of networking features, and you have to adapt nowadays. I mean, thankfully, I launched this online company before a lot of other companies needed to make a lot of changes. So when this changed for us, we didn't change anything. We were already an online work from home company,
Hmm.
and we actually paid out a little bit of extra when everything went down to our staff. But yeah, there's no more conferences for quite some time. I mean, I was actually in the Philippines for most of the pandemic. Got back to this side of the world in the U.S. for just about 3 months ago, and it's quite open, which is fabulous. It seems like it's almost over out here because there's just nothing. I like the word handshake means so much to me, and we're called handshaking because there's just nothing like an in-person handshake. Every year we get more and more emails of people trying to start online relationships with us, and every year that gets worth just a little bit less.
Yeah.
Because there's just because of the sheer quantity of, I mean, I'd like to call some of it spam, most of it spam,
Mm-hmm.
of people trying to sell you random stuff from abroad or even from your own city. It's just another email or another Facebook message, another notification, another app that you download that's bugging you with advertisements. And that in-person handshake, though, nothing can really replace that. So I think COVID really put a lot of that on pause. To answer your question, I think a lot of more people are looking at how the internet can help them, which is, I think, good and bad. For me, if I was trying to actively network like I was before, when I was trying to connect with members of Congress and billionaires, venture capitalists on my video series, I feel like there's more competition now because, like, I was emailing Mark Cuban from Shark Tank just directly.
Mm-hmm.
He's a billionaire. He was emailing me back. He said no. He didn't want to be on my show, but I wonder if he'd still email me back after the pandemic, because surely there's more people, finding his personal email address or, connecting with him on different ways nowadays. Now that everyone can work from home, there's probably more competition online, and I don't see that changing. So, the cold outreach online, I think the pandemic means that you need to be even more creative on how you do your cold outreach. That's how I think it has changed
Yeah.
networking.
Do you think that we will get back to having lots of in-person networking and the conferences and so on? How do you see the future of networking?
Yeah, I think we'll get back to it. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, when is this pandemic going to end, and how is it going to change things? I mean, I kind of like carrying around hand sanitizer in my backpack all day, every day. But I also like to have dine-in available and no curfews. I like conferences. I like to shake hands. I just am more comfortable washing my hands before and after, or at least carrying the hand sanitizer around.
Yeah.
So and a conference is not about shaking hands with every single person there. It's about connecting with a few quality people. It's all about the quality more than the quantity. You're not the used car salesman at the network event trying to hand the car to everyone.
Yeah.
It's best actually if you research the people in advance and know who to talk to and what to talk to them about. So I don't know. I hope things go back to normal. I sure do miss more events and more conferences. It seems like in the U.S. it's back to normal. I would say in most of the states. However, back in Philippines, where I spent a lot of the pandemic, since that's where I hire my staff, it's not open. There's not events. They just removed the curfew, and it's seems like the pandemic might slow them down a bit longer than in other places.
Yeah. Yeah. It's different in different parts of the world, isn't it?
Definitely.
So, how do you feel about the name of your company now? Because handshaking has kind of become a bit taboo. People are not doing it so much or feel awkward about shaking hands.
Yeah, I've thought about that quite a bit. I actually, during, I think, April of last year, I made a joke about it because I actually, originally we had the domain Handshaken without the G at the end because someone else owned Handshaking with the G on the end. So we kind of had the slang version. And the year before the pandemic, I spent $8,000 just to buy the oneword.com with the G on it. And then we had a pandemic and handshaking was allowed. So I made a music video in quarantine about how I paid for this domain and how sad it is, and now we're in this pandemic. But actually, if you look at the data online, it actually says that the domain itself is worth more. It's most certainly saved us time to have the G on the end, because now my entire sales team, they can say, yeah, you can email me at adam@handshaken.com. You don't have to say Adam at Handshaken without the G.com. Let me spell that for you. It's HAND. It's so as far as if I think the handshake's going to disappear, I don't know. I mean, sometimes I find myself not even handshaking with people. It kind of feels like if you know the person, you trust them more and you're more willing to handshake them. But when you meet someone new, especially depending on, today I'm in Costa Rica. So every country, it kind of feels a little bit different on what people expect. And I think a lot of countries are confused. The restrictions too. If you're in a country that's super locked down, it feels like you're not supposed to do it, even if it's not talked about. But in the U.S., no one cares. You're going to have a handshake in the U.S. And I think seeing as the U.S. is one of the countries that kind of, at least in my state, in Colorado, is one of the first states to kind of get vaccinated, get it cleaned up, and return to normal. And we're already there. I kind of feel like, the rest of the world's going to go back to handshaking if that was their custom before.
So handshaking hasn't gone away.
I read so many articles and even blogged about it a little bit during the pandemic. I mean, I think it's okay if you don't want to handshake with someone. I think that's okay. Just give it the elbow bump or a nice Japanese bow, whatever you want to do. And I think people are accepting with that. And I definitely think it's a good idea. I mean, before the pandemic, I did not carry around hand sanitizer. And that's just silly to go around to a conference and shake hands with everyone and then go eat and not even think about washing your hands or sanitizing. I mean, cleanliness, sanitization there's nothing wrong with that. We can always have more of that in our life.
Absolutely.
But, So, but I think people still want to handshake to start a relationship.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thank you very much for chatting to me about your company and how everything works and handshaking. So if people want to get in touch with you, Matt, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. Well, you can check out our content and websites on our primary website, handshaking.com. And if you want to email me a question directly, I'm obviously just Matt, M-A-T-T, at handshaking.com. And we'd be happy to talk about networking with anyone. I'm, of course, very passionate about it and interested in how everyone does networking in their own world.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, Matt. And I wish you all the best for the future and getting back to more in-person meetings and lots of physical handshaking.
Yes, thank you, Liz, and thank you, listeners, for hanging out with us.
Thanks for listening to Small Business, Big Network. If you found this podcast useful, please do rate, review and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with the rest of your network too.